This is podcast 4 on issues in relation to the British Council's American University of Beirut Commonweord Collaboration Digital Narratives Project. There's no doubt that there are political undercurrents to the world that we have built. Put simply, there are an oppressed or subaltern people, and there are the oppressors. In our case, it's those in the prison camp and being the oppressed, and the guards or the bloods being the oppressors. But the game stands as a metaphor too for other situations in which you've got an oppressed and an oppressor. And so the deep moral consideration that this setup brings to the fore is whether it is appropriate to be building a game that looks into this situation. Laden as such a situation can be with historical trauma. You know, the connotations of the word game as something fun, something trivial, something that's not serious, as a leisure activity, seems discordant with the traumatic issues that potentially the game might deal with. And related to that, having the oppressed as objects, or in game developer language as assets, controlled by a player who is most often based in the rich West rather than the South, raises other moral questions. In the project, we've not arrived at the level of coding yet, intricate coding, but one way that this moral question can be wired into the game is to place limits, we found, on the interactivity. So this is one way in which digital narratives can acknowledge the insufficiency of the form as a medium to represent the trauma of the oppressed. The main plus of the video game in terms of commemoration or examination of historical traumatic events of the oppressed is that it can resist the player. The player who's trying to play the software may be faced with coding which says to the would-be player, prove you are worthy to play this game, prove that you understand the character well enough to move on to another level. And if they can't prove that, the game potentially may not continue or does not release them to the next level, whatever that might be. Many of the ideas that I mentioned here are contained within Sarah Jane Laro's book, Kill the Overseer. And some of the phrases she uses to describe this resistance that can be built into games are the obstinate text, intractability, the recalcitrant text, the disobedient book, the defiant book. Another argument advanced for the use of games is that the games may be considered alternative monuments. The well-reported pulling down in Bristol, United Kingdom, of the statue of the slave trader Coulson raised awareness among the general public of the lack of any public acknowledgement of the historical colonial terror that had been inflicted by Britain and other colonial forces during that era of the slave trade. There are no commemorations of that trauma, and the argument advanced by Laurel is that the games can be, in a way, an act of commemoration, a kind of digital statue, if you like, that marks that occasion and enacts the remembrance and the alternative history. Then the final meditation that we've looked at in terms of the Lauro Kill the Overseer textbook is the idea of endings, and that it may not be appropriate for a game to have a neat and tidy ending that suggests closure. And so failure, Laura suggests, could be an integral part of the game. The game may have an built inaccessibility, or the game pushes back, or the options foreclose, or there's a denial of catharsis. That's some of the ideas or phrases that Laura has used when discussing how games such as these might end or not end. This has led us to many other creative imaginings and given us some deep thought about how we can structure the game in such a way that we get narratives of resistance that do not glorify the hunter so much as the hunted. So those are some of the reflections that are ongoing as we develop the game.